Well, good morning to everybody. It is really not only a great delight, but also an honor to be here at KIS. I have a fairly special bond with this school, and I never thought I would be here before an audience talking at a TEDx event, because my daughter-in-law was an alumnus, and I had heard from her many stories about the school with great pride and nostalgia. So it is really a delight and special for me to be here today. So why am I here today? Well, I'm here because I represent a microscopic statistic. We're all statistics, but this is a microscopic statistic. Because about 40 years ago, when it wasn't considered very appropriate to do so, I chose to be a diplomat. And it was not considered appropriate to do so not only in India, but anywhere in the world. The numbers of women diplomats were almost microscopic anywhere. I joined the diplomatic service, and then, as you just heard, I went on to be ambassador in various capitals of the world, Stockholm, Riga, Doha, Tokyo, and Majuro. Majuro, check out Majuro. It is the capital of the Marshall Islands, a tiny country in the Pacific Ocean. So how did all this happen? But before that, I must say that this audience perhaps doesn't think it a big deal to choose a career that takes you across oceans and continents, because you've come from different parts of the world. But back then, when I chose to be a diplomat, I must tell you that it was a big deal. And to think of it, it still is a big deal. You know, to be the designated spokesperson for your country in another land, and to be entrusted the responsibility to build bridges of political empathy, cultural understanding, and very importantly nowadays, economic engagement with those countries. Or stand before the UN at UN conferences, speak and negotiate on subjects that affect every one of us on this planet. Subjects such as global disarmament, global warming, human rights, basic human rights. So this is what diplomacy really means. And I was happy that through a whole process, which I will talk about, I reached this place. And I will talk to 4 main points about how I reached here. First is daring to dream. The second was making choices. The third was knowing my own strengths and talents, such as they were or were not, and having belief in my own instincts. The last, which I think is about what the topic of today's TED Talks, is really looking at challenge, not as a challenge, but as an opportunity that leads to empowerment and success. So, to go to the beginning, the dreams. The beginning was fairly ordinary and uneventful. I went to good schools, I had fairly supportive parents, and I can tell you something that when I was young, I think the first challenges I knew were not what I faced, but what I threw at them, because I just wanted to be different. I didn't want to do things that other girls did. I wanted to have a great career. I wanted to travel. I wanted to transform the world. But I can tell you, I had absolutely no clue how I was going to go about it. I was pretty clueless. Maybe I had too many clues, because I kept changing my views and my dreams with each person I met who made an impact on me, or each circumstance or situation or experience that I had. And this is a state of being I'm sure a lot of young people here in this room also go through, that you want to do something, and at this point of time, you really don't know what you want to do. But I think it's a fantastic state of being, because you know what it means. It means that your mind is open, you're seeking, and you're receptive. So what were the dreams? The dreams in those days were also kind of limited. So started off with medicine, scientist. I wanted to be a social worker when I saw poverty, which was quite endemic in my country in those days. I wanted to be an air hostess when I was a teenager and terribly glamour-stricken, as often happens. And I also wanted to be a diplomat. Remember that love for travel I had, so I also wanted to be a diplomat. So those were the dreams. And then we come to the choices. Now, this is far more difficult, I think, today than it was in my time. As I said, the choices were also fairly limited. So it started off with wanting to do medicine. But the first time I had to pin down and dissect this large rana tigrina in the biology lab, and I fainted, I discovered that this was not for me. So I changed, and I decided, yes, science it was going to be, but let me try chemistry. So I did my first degree in chemistry. But doing this first degree in chemistry meant long hours at the lab. And again, I realized this really wasn't what I wanted to do. But I must say that it is really, research is a fantastic career. And if you want to transform the world, I can't think of another area where you can really impact the lives of millions of people by your discoveries and what you can do in research. But it was really not for me. So I completely change all over again. And I go into the liberal arts. And then I do English literature. Now, what's my point of saying this? Is that it's perfectly fine to change horses midstream if that ride is not comfortable for you. And that is really what I went on to do. And this brings me to the next point, which is to know your strengths. And to be able to know what your innate challenges are. And when I say strengths, I really don't mean grades. You're not looking at grades when you're at the stage in school. What you're looking at your strengths, your talents, what is it you really like, and also to be able to recognize opportunities that come which really appeal to your innate disposition. That is really very important. For me, all this came together in a very strange way in the form of a man, my brother-in-law. Now, he was a top cop somewhere, but he thought it was completely the wrong career option, but he was already too far gone, he couldn't change it. And he thought he had wanted always to be a diplomat, and he wanted to live out this dream somehow vicariously or otherwise through me. So he told me about the Indian Civil Services exam, and he told me when I was filling in the form to tick that little box which said Indian Foreign Service, and I could tell you my parents had no clue that that was what I was planning to do. So I want to say that very often opportunities come in all kinds of forms. It could also be human. It could be parents. It could be a wonderful teacher that you have. Or it could be just somebody completely unrelated. And you are then well on your way. Now I now come to challenges. I could tell you that Indian Civil Service exam is a humongous challenge. There were 20 slots for the Indian Foreign Service and 100,000 aspirants, perhaps a little more. But that wasn't the biggest one. I got over that. And then I walk into this interview room, and very nervously, and there in front is this sort of array, these distinguished-looking men, and that one token woman. I walk into this room, and I hear this booming voice of the chairman, who says, "So, you plan to marry a cook?" And I stopped for a moment, and I thought, how politically incorrect was that? You can't say those things any longer. And I think good men and women have really fought to remove discrimination in the workplace from our statute books. But have we removed them from minds? That really is going to take much longer. And why was I asked whether I wanted to marry a cook? Because there I was going to join the Indian Foreign Service, I was going to travel all over the world. Now, who in the world would want to, put aside their career and travel with me, other than somebody who was willing to take care of my home and hearth? And that also said that he expected women to be in the kitchen cooking. So since I couldn't cook, there was a man who was going to cook. I mean, those were the days. But I'm happy to say that, that has changed to some extent. And so into this career, and my first posting was in Hong Kong, where I was sent to learn Mandarin. Now, in our first postings in the Foreign Service, you have to choose a language and choose a particular geographical area in which you specialize. And it was Mandarin and China for me. And I could tell you it was not easy. Mandarin is a very, very tough language. But it was the most marvelous opportunity, because can you imagine what it did for me? It opened to me 1/6 of humanity, another 1/6, because you have 1/6 sitting here in India, 1/6 in China, so between them 1/3 of humanity that I could now communicate with. And I was living in this absolutely marvelous country. I was seeing the transformation of the country, and this is a country which has transformed enormously in a period of 30 years, like it's never happened in the history of mankind. And China is a very, very important neighbor for India. So all this came together when I was in China, and that was a challenge that really turned to be an opportunity. I think experience that I had that talked about challenges, reminded me about challenges which could lie really in the eye of the beholder, was at UN conferences. You know, there I was, an Indian diplomat, wound in these 6 yards of unstitched material, big dot on my forehead, diamond in my nose, and there I was trying to talk about serious issues. Now, I had to tell them, you know, go beyond my traditional attire, listen to what I'm trying to say. And, you know, that was really a hugely empowering experience, because when they realized that you talked sense, you were articulating your country's point of view, and you could stand your ground. And that acceptance that you got was very empowering. But I must also tell you that some of the challenges are what you set yourself. And I had set myself this challenge because I wanted everything. You know, I wanted to be a good wife, I wanted to be a good mother, I wanted to be a good homemaker, and I wanted to be accepted as an outstanding professional. And I must tell you, I found quite early in life that there was a secret way, there was a way to do that. And that was just to work doubly as hard as my male colleagues to be accepted half as much as them. So that is how I started my career. It was a huge challenge at that point, but I think you overcome it as you go on in life. Talking of empowerment, you know, I moved on as ambassador, and one of my postings was to a country in the GCC. As you know, this is one of the Arab countries, and I was the first Indian woman ambassador ever to be sent to that part of the world. My colleagues in the Foreign Service were not amused, my male colleagues. They said it was a bad idea, I would not be effective at all, because very male-dominated society, and what in the world was government thinking sending me there? As it happened, I must say that actually gender became an opportunity. And the reason was, well, they were going to deal with any Indian ambassador, because India is politically and economically important to that part of the world. But in addition, there was the fact that, you know, the Indian population outnumbered the locals 2:1. So they had to deal with the Indian ambassador. There were so many issues. The other thing was, and this was my secret weapon, that behind the veil were these powerful women. And this was an area that men normally couldn't access. I had access to that world. And they opened doors for me like nothing ever did. So that is when a gender challenge really became an opportunity in the part of the world, and nobody really would imagine that could have happened. The other thing that I think that posting taught me about empowerment was that empowerment's a very, very heavy word. It comes with a lot of responsibility. Because I was just telling you that the large number of Indians that were there, of citizens of India that were there. Now, most of them had set out to improve their lives, and I'm happy to say that most of them had been able to achieve their dreams. But they were a small minority, and these were really pitiful victims of circumstance. And, you know, they looked to you as the only hope in their life to dignity and freedom and to get away from the situation that they had come to. And that's when I realized that, yes, I could help them, I could reach out, but, you know, I needed a lot of empathy, and more than that, I needed to realize that this was a huge responsibility. There were lives of people, and there were great expectations in my hands. The diplomatic service brings a lot of experiences, but one thing it makes you is that you've got to be really, really good at adjusting to change, and I could tell you that. So, you know, the only constant really in our lives is change. So you move around, you uproot yourself, and you move from different geographies. You know, we just heard about Amrita going from Tunisia to Mongolia. And so there you go to completely different cultures and cuisines and civilizations, economic situations, different people. And as the ambassador, before you've put your foot there, you're supposed to be an instant expert. But again, to immerse yourself in this and look at this as an opportunity is really what changes everything. And I was really fortunate to be in Japan. as ambassador. And this is such a unique and marvelous country. You know, it's an evolved civilization. It's been a world economic power. It's a very, very special place. And it was in a way the end of my career, but it was a great dream fulfilled to be there and to be able to contribute to the relations between India and Japan at a very, very good point of our bilateral relations. So that really brings me to the conclusion of what I have to say. One is that each one of us is very unique. I'm sure you hear this cliche all the time. And each one of us has a hand of circumstance dealt to us. Also, challenges, as we just heard, are ubiquitous. It's like the air we breathe. I mean, there are challenges everywhere. But if you were listening to me, I don't know if you caught that there was a thread in my entire narrative, and that was perseverance. Perseverance and really attitude. I think these are very important. And I think these are two things that help you to really change challenges to opportunities. And also, I think at the end of it, what do we want to do? We want to leave the world a better place than we found it. And as we do so, we also want to have some fun. So I hope each one of you, the young people here, can do that in life, change the world, have fun as you do it. Good luck, and thank you very much.